I let my brother move in. Then he tried to kick me out of my own house. And then, at 44 years old, I never expected to find peace in silence. But it's become my most loyal companion. After Greg died, everything I thought I knew about my future disappeared in a single, unrelenting wave. He passed 4 years ago, stomach cancer that went from a whisper to a scream in less than 12 months. We had been together since I was 25, 18 years. Most mornings, I still catch myself reaching out to his side of the bed, expecting the dip in the mattress or the warmth of his body next to mine. Instead, there's nothing but smooth sheets and the cold reminder that I'm the only one left. Greg left me everything. The house just outside Cedar Falls, a low-built, four-bedroom brick ranch he insisted on buying the year after our wedding, and roughly $480,000 in savings, retirement, and other modest investments. I know how that sounds. People hear that number and imagine luxury, vacations, designer clothes, early retirement. But they forget what it actually means to have someone you loved taken away without warning. I would have traded every dollar, every square inch of this house, every comfort I have now, just to get one more year, or hell, even a week. But we don't get deals like that. I stayed. The house was too big for one person, but I couldn't bring myself to leave it. I made the spaces my own, repainted the guest room, got rid of Greg's enormous leather recliner, and turned his old office into a reading room. There was grief, of course, but in time, it gave way to something quieter, something more manageable. I found a rhythm. I work as director of talent at a mid-sized energy firm downtown. Steady hours, fair pay, not too much drama. The evenings are mine. I read. I cook when I feel like it, and if I don't, I order in. I stopped waiting for something to fill the silence and started appreciating it instead. My parents don't see it that way. My mother, Lois, thinks my life is withering away without purpose, and my father, Earl, nods along behind her like a backup singer with no solo of his own. They've been married 48 years, never spent more than a weekend apart, and can't fathom how someone, especially their daughter, could choose to live alone. Every monthly visit turns into an unsolicited intervention. "You're still young, Rachel," my mother says without fail. "It's not too late to adopt. Or try a donor. Have you thought about fostering?" She always asks this as if I'm unaware that science or the internet exists. My father just sips his iced tea and adds, "Your mother's just trying to help." I make the trip once a month, like clockwork. 2 hours each way. Always on a Sunday, because it feels less invasive than a full weekend. I bring baked goods or flowers, we have lunch, and then I endure an hour or so of polite sabotage. Lois casually drops names of sons of her bridge partners, always with some backhanded commentary meant to stir me into action. I ran into Carol the other day. She'll say with manufactured innocence, her son Dennis is single again. Handsome too. You remember Dennis, don't you? He's got that little place by the river now. What she never adds is that Dennis is 41, unemployed for the third year running, and still lives with his mother while launching a series of increasingly doomed businesses, from homemade beef jerky to crypto scams. I've learned to deflect. "Thanks, Mom, but I'm not really dating right now," I tell her. Every time, she never listens, but I say it anyway. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't do it because your mouth is already dirty. You do it because it would feel wrong not to. The last Sunday visit started just like all the others: sunlight, iced tea, the smell of Lois's roasted chicken in the oven. But the conversation took a sudden detour. No awkward segues into matchmaking. No mentions of Dennis or the divorced ex-pastor she once tried to set me up with. Instead, they were strangely quiet during lunch, exchanging glances between bites. When I finally asked what was going on, Lois folded her napkin with careful precision and said, "We're worried about your brother." My stomach sank before she even said his name. Corey is 36, 7 years younger than me. Always the golden child. While I stayed single and built a life that made sense to me, he did what was expected, married young, had a charming wedding, and settled in what my parents called a respectable life. He married Amber 3 years ago, a woman who looked like she stepped off the cover of a Southern Living magazine. Sweet voice, perfect manners, always volunteering at something. My parents loved her instantly. She wore pearl earrings and called my father sir. What happened? I asked, already suspecting the answer. My father sighed, like the weight of the world had been personally dropped on his shoulders. He got let go, Earl said. The warehouse shifted to automation. He was one of the first to be cut. It's been 2 months, Lois added, and their lease is up at the end of the month. They can't afford to renew. The landlord's raising the rent. It's hard, Rachel. I nodded slowly, the shape of the request already forming before it left her mouth. They need a place to stay, she said. Just until Corey finds something steady and they can save up for a deposit somewhere else. I didn't respond right away. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Mom, I started carefully. Corey's a bit high energy. I'm used to living alone. My routine. Lois cut me off. He's your brother. Family helps family. And Amber's such a sweetheart. She said she'd handle cooking, and she's very tidy. It'll be like having house help, only family. I almost laughed. Amber had never lifted a finger at any family gathering unless it was to compliment the host or take an artfully staged photo for her Instagram. Still, I knew how this conversation would end. It wasn't a request. It was a foregone conclusion. After an hour of pleading, layered with just enough guilt and faint threats about how disappointed Greg would have been in me, I gave in. I told them yes, but with clear conditions. Fine, I said. They can stay, but just for 2 months. And they need to contribute, groceries, utilities, something, and I want no surprises. Lois clapped her hands as if I'd just agreed to host a wedding. Thank you, sweetheart. You won't regret this. I'll call Corey right now. As she disappeared into the hallway with her phone, my father patted my hand and said, That's my girl. Corey's lucky to have a sister like you. I smiled back, hollow and already preparing myself for the chaos to come. Because deep down, I knew exactly what was coming, and I knew I'd regret it. Exactly 1 week after that Sunday lunch turned ambush, I found myself staring at my front door, watching a beat-up silver SUV roll into the driveway. The back seat was stuffed to the roof with duffel bags, a coffee maker, what looked like a pressure cooker, and 2 plants wedged precariously between laundry baskets. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and forced a smile that felt more like a stretch than an emotion. Corey jumped out of the car first, same boyish grin he'd worn since high school, and pulled me into a hug like nothing had changed since we were kids stealing cookies from Mom's pantry. Ratch, you're a lifesaver. We promise. This won't be for long, he said, setting down a suitcase and clapping my shoulder like we were frat brothers reuniting after a decade. Amber got out slowly from the passenger side. Her ponytail pulled so tight it looked like it could hold up a tent. She gave me a polite smile and stepped forward with both hands wrapped around a tote bag. Thank you so much, Rachel, she said softly, voice as sweet as honey-drenched tea. This really means the world to us. I promise we'll stay out of your way. I had to bite back the urge to say you're already in my way, and instead stepped aside to let them in. I showed them the guest room on the first floor, the one Greg's parents used to stay in when they visited from Vermont, now decorated in soft gray tones with a new quilt I'd splurged on last winter. I'd even cleared space in the closet and emptied 2 drawers. It felt too generous even then. After a quick tour of the house, I handed Corey a copy of the key and pointed to the cabinet where I'd made space for their groceries and dry goods. I usually get home around 6, I said, trying to keep my voice light but firm. I'm not big on cooking, so I eat pretty simply. But I keep the place clean, and I'd like to keep it that way. Amber beamed. Don't even worry about it. I love cooking. I'll have dinner ready when you walk through the door every night. Corey nodded enthusiastically. We'll keep things spotless. Amber's basically a domestic ninja. I gave a half smile and thought maybe, just maybe, this might actually be manageable. For the first couple of weeks, it really wasn't awful. I'd walk in from work and find the kitchen smelling like roasted garlic and basil, sometimes cinnamon and nutmeg. Amber made things I hadn't eaten since Greg was alive. Chicken marsala, fresh biscuits, even some complicated slow-cooked pork stew she'd seen on a cooking show. The dishes were done, floors were swept. The laundry basket I kept in the hallway was suddenly always empty. Corey spent his days in front of his laptop at the kitchen table, earbuds in, scrolling job listings. It was almost too perfect. I found myself wondering if I'd misjudged them, if the version I knew was just the surface, and this was the real deal underneath. But comfort has a way of dulling your instincts if you let it. And I did. By the fourth week, the routine started to shift. I came home on a Tuesday to a quiet, empty kitchen. No smells of dinner, no clinking pots, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the sight of breakfast dishes still stacked in the sink, half submerged in gray, lukewarm water. I waited an hour. Nothing. Finally, I made myself a grilled cheese, ate in silence, and tried not to let it eat at me. Around 7:30, they breezed through the front door, laughing, arms loaded with shopping bags from 3 stores I recognized, none of them budget-friendly. Amber barely glanced at me as she dropped her bags on the counter. "Oh, you already ate," she said, like it was an afterthought. Corey pulled out a bottled smoothie from the fridge, cracked it open, and leaned against the counter. "Just ran some errands," he said. I noticed the logo on the biggest bag, Bright Ridge Home, a store where the throw pillows cost more than my monthly internet bill. I nodded slowly. "Everything okay?" I asked. They both shrugged, and neither bothered answering. The next day, the same. I came home to a mess, crumpled paper towels on the counters, a trail of mail scattered across the living room, a banana peel on the coffee table. No dinner, no note, no apology. That night, I decided to bring it up. As I was microwaving leftover pasta from the weekend, I cleared my throat. "Hey, I thought we had an arrangement about meals and keeping things tidy. It feels like things have slipped." Amber exhaled dramatically and rolled her eyes like a bored teenager. "I've been busy," she said flatly, turning to pour herself a glass of water. "I've been working on a business idea with some friends. We've been meeting here during the day to get things moving." I blinked. "Here?" As in, here in the house. She shrugged. "We needed somewhere quiet. Coffee shops are loud and expensive." I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. "You've been bringing people into my home while I'm at work?" "Without asking." "They're not strangers," she snapped. "They're friends. And it's not like we're damaging anything." I set down my fork, feeling my jaw tighten. "Amber, they're strangers to me. If you want to hold meetings, that's fine, but do it at their place or in a public space. This isn't a co-working office." Amber narrowed her eyes, then threw her fork down onto the plate with a loud clatter. "Fine," she said, storming away down the hallway. Corey gave me a half-hearted glare and muttered, "Way to support her. She's trying to build something." I barely opened my mouth before he turned and followed her. I spent the rest of the night scrubbing the kitchen in silence, replaying the conversation again and again until I was too angry to sleep. The days that followed felt like I was living with ghosts. Amber stopped talking to me entirely. She didn't say good morning, didn't ask if I wanted anything from the store, didn't make a single attempt to interact. Corey went along with it, giving me minimal responses, disappearing for hours without telling me where. The home-cooked meals vanished. I came home to empty pans in the sink or half-eaten fast food on the counter. Once I found the back door wide open, lights blazing in 2 rooms, and no one in sight. I went back to making my own meals. Sandwiches, salads, soup from cans. It was like rewinding time, only worse, because now I had to navigate someone else's chaos in what used to be my sanctuary. One Friday night, I walked into the living room to find them curled up on the couch with a large pizza and a bottle of wine. Neither looked up when I walked in. They didn't offer me a slice. I didn't ask. I leaned against the doorway. "Quick question. How's the job search going?" Corey didn't even mute the television. "Progress," he said. I crossed my arms. "What kind of progress?" He shrugged. "Had a couple of interviews. Still waiting to hear back." Amber didn't acknowledge me at all. She turned the volume up. "When you moved in," I said carefully, "we agreed this would be temporary. 2 months. That's coming up soon." Corey waved a hand dismissively. "We'll let you know when we've got something locked down." I didn't respond. I just walked upstairs and shut the door behind me, heart pounding in frustration. My house didn't feel like mine anymore, and I was starting to wonder how long they were planning to make it theirs. I hadn't been this tense in my own home since the week Greg came home from the hospital for the last time. The silence was back, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded, sharp-edged, waiting to snap. Corey and Amber drifted around like tenants with squatters' rights, not acknowledging me unless absolutely necessary, leaving crumbs of conversation that amounted to little more than polite noise. By now, the pattern was clear. They'd arrived with grateful words and helpful hands, settled in with ease, then slowly decided the house was theirs to shape. And I had let them. The third month came, and with it, the monthly visit I used to dread for the usual reasons: pitying glances, talk of children I didn't want, and names of random, underachieving men my mother thought I should date. Now, I dreaded it because I had to tell my parents the truth. I wanted my home back, and I knew they wouldn't take my side. I arrived at their place in the early afternoon, and right after the obligatory hugs and coffee, Lois launched into her version of events. "Corey says you've been giving them a hard time," she said, carefully slicing into a lemon tart like we were on some kind of sitcom. "He said you're pressuring them about finding work, acting like they're freeloaders." My father gave me a look, disappointed, but not surprised. "That's not like you, Rachel. You've always been so generous." I put my fork down. I haven't pressured anyone. I asked if they were making progress. I reminded them this was supposed to be temporary. It was scuffed. They're under stress, Rachel. It's not easy being jobless and feeling judged in your own home. I blinked. "My home," I said quietly, then louder. "It's my home, and they've stopped doing anything to contribute. Amber hasn't cooked in weeks. She invites people over when I'm at work. Strangers. I had to ask her not to use my house as her meeting space." Lois shook her head. "Amber told us you've been cold, even rude. Honestly, it sounds like you're making things difficult for no reason." I stared at her in disbelief. "So they complain to you, but they won't talk to me directly. That doesn't sound manipulative to you." My father sighed and reached for more coffee. "They're family. Family supports each other through hard times. You're being too rigid." I knew then that nothing I said would change their view. They saw me as a fortress, steady, unshakable, endlessly available to absorb whatever burden the rest of the family couldn't carry. Greg had once warned me about this tendency, how they never respected boundaries unless they were reinforced with steel. Dinner was awkward, and the moment I got back in the car, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me, so hard I had to sit with the engine running for a few minutes. I had gone there for support and came back feeling like I was the villain. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed another vehicle parked where I usually left my car. It wasn't Corey's or Amber's. It was a dark blue minivan I didn't recognize. I parked on the street and stepped inside, only to be hit with the unmistakable sound of unfamiliar voices and the sight of several large suitcases lined up neatly in the hallway. I walked into the living room and stopped dead. Sitting on my couch like they'd been invited by royalty were Amber's parents, Victor and Nadine. I met them twice before, both times at family gatherings, where they offered polite smiles and asked invasive questions masked as small talk. "Rachel," Corey said, jumping to his feet with a weak smile. "Look who came to visit." I forced a smile and greeted them, though my pulse was thudding in my ears. Nadine nodded, crossing her legs and smoothing her already perfect slacks. "We're on our way to Florida to visit my son," she explained, as if this justified their presence in my living room with luggage. "Corey, can I speak to you upstairs?" I asked. My voice was steady, but barely. He followed me reluctantly, and the moment the door closed behind us in my office, I turned to him. "Why are Amber's parents here? With suitcases? Did you seriously invite them to stay here without asking me?" Corey scratched his neck and looked down. "It's just for a few days. They needed to stop on the way. It didn't seem like a big deal." "Not a big deal," I snapped. "You had no right to make that decision for my house." Corey held up his hands. "They're already here. What did you want me to do? Tell them to leave?" "Yes," I said flatly. "Or you could have called me and asked. But you didn't, and that tells me you didn't care what my answer would be." He muttered an apology, but it was hollow. Back downstairs, Amber had suddenly transformed into the helpful, attentive houseguest she hadn't been for a month. Dinner was magically ready: grilled chicken, salad, some kind of rosemary bread she claimed to have made from scratch. Nadine and Victor acted like hosts rather than guests. They asked about my job, my salary, how many square feet the house was. Nadine even asked if I ever felt lonely in such a large space. Victor chimed in. A house this size could really be useful for a young family just starting out. I didn't say much during dinner, just nodded or offered brief answers. Then Nadine said something that stopped me cold. You know, Rachel, if it were me, I'd probably sell this place. Give half to your brother and downsize to something cozier. It just makes sense at your age. I almost choked on my wine. Excuse me? She smiled like it was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. Just saying, this place could really help your brother get on his feet. And it's too much for one person anyway. I set my glass down carefully. When you own a house like this, Nadine, you're free to do whatever you want with it. But this one is mine, and I have no plans to sell. The table went silent. Amber shot me a glare so sharp I almost felt it in my skin. Corey kept his eyes on his plate. The rest of dinner passed in a haze of clipped sentences and passive-aggressive silence. That week dragged like cement through water. Every time I entered a room, conversation stopped. Victor left wet towels on the bathroom floor. Nadine left dishes crusted with sauce in the sink. I was tiptoeing through my own house, praying for Friday to come so they'd be gone. But when Friday came, I didn't get peace. I got war. Friday afternoon, I drove home from work rehearsing what I was going to say. I'd had enough. They'd promised a short stay, no disruptions, minimal impact. Instead, they'd gradually absorbed my home like mold under paint, spreading their presence into every corner without asking or acknowledging it. I intended to sit Corey down, give him a firm but respectful timeline, and set a final boundary. 2 more weeks, and they were out. No delays, no guilt tripes, no excuses. What I walked into instead knocked the air straight out of my lungs. My suitcase was sitting by the front door. Next to it were 2 duffel bags I recognized from my closet and one of Greg's old travel totes, shoved full with what looked like my toiletries and makeup bags. I stood there, staring like I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Then I unzipped the suitcase and found my clothes inside, hastily crammed in, some still on hangers, others barely folded. My heart dropped through the floor. Voices echoed from the living room. Cheerful, upbeat, casual, like they didn't just try to evict me from my own house. When I walked in, they were gathered around the coffee table, which was covered in a notepad, 2 laptops, printouts, and what looked like a seating chart. Amber was laughing at something Nadine had just said, while Victor pointed at a diagram like a wedding planner on a deadline. Corey looked up, noticed me, and smiled like I was just back from a walk. "What's going on?" I asked, voice flat and cold. Silence dropped over the room like a sudden blackout. Amber blinked and said, as if nothing was out of place, "We're planning my parents' anniversary party. 36 years. Everyone's flying in. We figured the house would be perfect for it." I stared at her. "Here? In this house?" Victor chuckled, as though I were the one being unreasonable. "It's just for the weekend. We've already got the food arranged, decorations on order. It'll be a beautiful event," Nadine added. "We assumed you'd be staying with your parents. It's just 2 nights. We didn't think it'd be an issue." I turned to Corey, begging him to intervene, to stop this insanity. Instead, he just nodded. "We figured it was simpler this way. You said you visit them once a month anyway." I could barely process what I was hearing. "You packed my bags. You planned an entire party here. You didn't tell me, didn't ask, didn't even pretend to check. And now you're telling me to leave my own house because your in-laws want to have a party here." Amber shrugged like I was being unreasonable. "It's just 1 weekend, Rachel. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is." Nadine folded her arms. "You're overreacting. It's family. Surely you can understand that celebrating love and commitment matters more than 1 night of inconvenience." I almost laughed, but it came out as a sharp breath. "Let me make one thing very clear. This is my house. I own every piece of furniture, every fork, every wall and ceiling in this place. And none of you, not one, gets to tell me where I sleep. If there's going to be any leaving, it'll be you. We're your guests. But I'm not going anywhere." Amber rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd sprain something. "You're being dramatic. You've had the place to yourself for years. It's just a party." I locked eyes with her. "There will be no party. I want your parents out by tomorrow." Nadine gasped like I'd slapped her. "You can't cancel this. We've invited 40 people. They're flying in from 3 different states." I shook my head. "That's your problem, not mine. You should have thought about that before trying to kick me out of my own house." Corey's voice, soft and half-hearted, cut in. Rachel, come on. Don't do this. Just give us a couple of days. We got everything planned. I already gave you 3 months, I said. I gave you food, space, electricity, water, and patience. And this is how you repay me. Amber picked up a pillow and slammed it down. You're just mad because you don't have anyone to celebrate with. That's what this is really about. For a second, the world tilted. Greg's face flashed in my mind, and I saw red. Get out. By tomorrow, or I'll make sure none of you can ever come back again. I stormed upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and called my mother. I needed someone, anyone, to back me up. But the second she answered, I knew I wasn't going to get it. Corey mentioned a small gathering. She said carefully, honestly, Rachel, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. You overreacted. Why not just stay with us for the weekend and let them have their celebration? I stared at the ceiling in disbelief. They're throwing me out of my own house, and you're taking their side. She sighed like I was a fussy child. Family compromises, Rachel. Try to be the bigger person. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat perfectly still and decided I was done being polite. I was done being convenient. I was done being quiet. That night, I walked back downstairs and told them they were right. I said I was sorry for being selfish, that I'd stay with my parents for the weekend. Amber looked smug, Nadine triumphant, and Corey relieved. Victor toasted with his glass of cheap wine, saying, now that's the spirit. But behind my smile, something snapped completely. The next morning, I woke up at 6 and waited. At 7:15, the house was quiet. They'd all gone shopping for decorations, food, whatever else they needed to pull off this circus. I tiptoed downstairs and made sure every car was gone. Then I pulled up the locksmith I'd bookmarked on my phone the night before. I told him it was urgent, and by 8:30, a man named Troy was changing every lock on every door. Front, back, garage, and side. While he worked, I packed every one of their belongings. Corey's sneakers, Amber's skincare, Nadine's tacky jewelry collection, and Victor's suitcase full of wrinkle-resistant slacks. I placed every item on the front lawn with precision. By 10:15, I was sipping tea in my kitchen when the car pulled into the driveway. Bags of party supplies filled the back seat. Amber saw the luggage first. Her smile dropped like a stone. I heard Corey try his key. Then knock again. Rachel, he called. The key's not working. I walked to the door, but I didn't open it. That's because I changed the locks, I said calmly. What? Amber shrieked. Open this door right now. No, I said. You're no longer welcome here. Take your things and leave. Victor barked something about the party. Nadine started wailing. Amber screamed that I was insane. Corey begged me to talk, but I didn't budge. When Amber threatened to call the police, I invited her to do it. Tell them how you've been living rent-free, uninvited guests in my house, throwing a party I never agreed to, and packing my bags without permission. I'd love to hear how that sounds in a report. There was yelling, stomping, pleading, and finally a long silence. Then the shuffling of luggage, the slamming of car doors, and tires crunching over gravel. I watched from the window, sipped my tea, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The call started before I even finished my tea. My mother, of course, was first. Her number flashed across the screen like an old alarm clock I hadn't set but couldn't stop. I ignored it. Then came the flood of texts. What have you done? Corey says you threw them out onto the street. Dad and I are extremely disappointed. I scrolled through them slowly, each one making me feel less like a daughter and more like a criminal who violated some unspoken rule of family servitude. I didn't reply. Not that day, not the next. I power my phone down and let the silence take its place, let the house reset itself after months of being overrun by entitlement, expectation, and noise. 3 days later, I got a message from my cousin Leah, the only member of my family who operates with any common sense. She told me Corey and Amber had moved into my parents' house, dragging their suitcases and their unresolved mess with them. Apparently, the fairy tale they had spun unraveled quickly. My mother, so used to praising Amber's poise and Corey's potential, now found herself wading through dirty dishes, passive-aggressive stares, and the full weight of their aimlessness. After just 1 week, my parents gave them a deadline, 2 months to find work and secure their own place, or they'd be out. I didn't gloat when I heard it, but I did exhale for the first time in days. It's been 4 weeks since I changed the locks. My parents are still not speaking to me, though the text messages finally stopped. The first week was a barrage of guilt. How could you do this to your own brother? You've embarrassed our family. Greg would be ashamed of how you treat people. That last one almost broke me. Greg was the only person who ever truly saw me. The only one who made me feel like my boundaries were worth defending. He used to joke that I was a gentle wall made of stone. Solid but kind. Kindness, I've learned, is only real if it comes with limits. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss the half-acknowledged greetings or the way Amber used to leave the kitchen light on at night like she owned the rhythm of the house. I've started cooking again, not every day, but enough to make the space feel like mine. I repainted the guest room a soft coral orange that makes the morning light feel warmer than it used to. I bought new linens, tossed the ones Amber had used into a donation bin, and deep cleaned the entire downstairs like I was casting out a spirit. It helped more than I expected. Last weekend, I hosted dinner for two of my oldest friends, real friends, the kind who clean up without being asked and bring wine without expecting anything in return. We laughed in the kitchen while chopping vegetables, listened to music too loud for our age, and filled the house with the kind of joy that doesn't come with strings attached. No one insulted my lifestyle, asked me why I was still single, or dropped hints about wasting my space or potential. They just came, ate, and loved me for exactly who I was. I know some people will call me cruel for what I did. I've read enough Reddit comments to know how divided opinions can be when it comes to family. But here's what no one seems to talk about. Family can be toxic too. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they're entitled to dismantle your peace. Loving someone doesn't mean handing them the keys to your life without boundaries. Corey still hasn't apologized. Amber never will. And my parents, I don't know. Maybe one day they'll understand, maybe not. Maybe they'll always see me as the cold one, the selfish sister who threw her brother onto the street instead of sharing her home like a proper woman should. But I know what really happened. I opened my door. I gave them comfort, safety, and time. They mistook generosity for permission to take more. They turned kindness into a license to ignore every limit I set. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry anymore either. I'm just done. For the first time since Greg died, the house is quiet again in a way that feels whole instead of hollow. I'm not waiting for someone to show up, fill the space, or tell me what should come next. I've stopped explaining myself to people who only listen long enough to argue. I've stopped shrinking to make other people feel more comfortable. This is my life, not the one my parents pictured, not the one society romanticizes, but mine. Peaceful, hard won, and finally mine again.